Welcome back to Terria, friends. Just like in my last video, Boon Chrono has gone through a revival, going from B tier to S tier, and this class can just compete on all levels with all other support classes. So please join me as we find out why I love this class just so damn much. Before we get further into the guide, I do have a separate guide for the Heal Boon Chronomancer, absolute top tier class that I definitely think you should have a look at if you want to play a heal class. Being able to do pretty much almost everything this can do, but obviously bring good healing and support, great in fractals, raids, strikes, open world, you name it, it can do it. The only thing about that guide is I did not explain stretch time correctly. I did pin someone's comment below with the correct explanation. Really great guide if you want to have a look at the heal variant. But for now, let's look at the DPS variant. Now, just like with the healing variant, the DPS Boon Chronomancer is so good with all the range damage, tons of CC, and just such a fun gameplay style with so much utility baked into the Mesmer. The only problems with it obviously being that you're going to need something to target to be able to generate a lot of your alacrity and quickness uptime depending on what you do, and it kind of can feel quite quick, especially when you have to try working continuum splits. There's a lot that you have to think about, meaning that even though newer players can pick it up fairly easily, it's going to be one of those builds that's going to take quite a while to get really good at. I'm going to try and suggest a few things you can do as a newer player to make the rotation easier, and as you get better at it, you just take the training wheels off and just crack on. Now let's have a look at gear and stats. For gear, you're going to want to try your best to get to 75% crit chance. You can either do this with or without food. Without food, like I have currently, allows me basically to just eat a normal power food with power and ferocity, although a lot of guides either go for power and precision or for precision and ferocity. But however you can get to 75%, that means that obviously with Fury, you're going to be capped on your crit chance, which is the most important part. You do not need any boon duration for this to work, but if you are a newer player, I would highly recommend going for something with boon duration, even if you look at something like soul pastries just to help you a little bit with extra concentration. Now for runes, we're going to look at the rune of infiltration. This is going to give us a ton of power as well as precision, helping us trying to get that crit chance to 75%, which is quite tough to do. Then for our relic, we will use Relic of the Thief. This is going to give us good DPS. Now for our weapons, we predominantly want dagger and sword in our main set and greatsword in our offset. This is very much subject to change. I highly recommend that you have a focus, as this is literally the best pulling game, and most of the time in most content it's required for Mesmers to bring this. Now pretty much in all game modes we will use the Sigil of Force and the Sigil of Impact. This will produce pretty much the highest damage for our class, and yeah, highly recommend it. Now with that being said, if you do want to push up your boon duration a little bit, you could swap out Impact for concentration just while you're learning the class, as this will help you get a little bit of boon duration, helping you maintain boons a little bit easier. So for food and utilities, that kind of brings us down to the question of where you're using food to help you get your 75% crit. If that's the case, use that food. If not, look at anything with power ferocity, power concentration, power precision, ferocity precision, whatever you needed to get to the 75% crit chance, and then whatever stats you're looking for above that. There's a lot of options based on your playstyle. And then for the utilities, we like the superior sharpening stones for the extra power. And now let's get straight into traits and specializations. Our specialization number 1, Domination. Minor trait 1, Illusions of Vulnerability, getting 3 stacks of vulnerability when we interrupt a foe on a 3-second cooldown. Now in column 1, we always look for bountiful blades when using the greatsword, allowing us to get an extra berserker although reduced damage, and allowing our mirror blade to bounce additional times, making our greatsword a lot more heavy for DPS, and therefore a really good option to pick. The second option, Empowered Illusions, is a really strong option if you are not running a greatsword. So if you want to go like sword focus maybe, this is a really strong option that people do look for. The other option, rendering shatter, could be interesting for open world if you do want extra stacks of vulnerability. So yeah, that is something you can have a look at. Although mostly with the greatsword, you're going to have so much rain, so much clone generation, and that's important for our shattering to make sure that we're keeping our boon uptime. So bountiful blades is almost a must. Minor trait 2, dazzling. Dazing or stunning a foe implies 5 stacks of vulnerability, so yeah, really good for vulnerability uptime. Now in column 2, the only real choice is egotism. This basically allows us to do 10% more damage to anything that has less health than us. That should pretty much be permanently on because you should have like healers and things, meaning that you're going to gain a lot of extra DPS from the skill. Although you can obviously look at shattered concentration if you do need boon removal. But with that being said, also you do have certain utilities, and obviously if you do have a sword in the main hand that rips boons pretty easily, making it not really the best option, but just something to be aware of. Minor trait 3, fragility. Getting extra percentage damage based on the vulnerability on the target. There should be permanent full stacks of vulnerability and fractals and raid groups, but perhaps in open world you do need to play with some of these vulnerability stacks to try get the best utility out of this minor trait. In column 3, there is only one real choice, vicious expression. We deal 15% and our illusions deal 15% extra damage to targets without boons, and disabling a foe removes boons from them. So this is really good for us because we'll pretty much strip quite a lot of boons with all of our disabled skills, and therefore we can do some big DPS. Specialization number 2, Dueling. Minor trait 1, critical infusion. We gain vigor when we deliver crit hits. That should be permanent, so we're going to keep up pretty much 50% vigor uptime on ourselves for free. Now in column 1, the big DPS increase is Phantasmal Fury. Your phantasms have fury when they come out. So yeah, really strong because we're trying to load up our phantasms with as much damage as possible. If you are out in open world and you do want more survivability, you can always look at mental gymnastics. When you dodge an attack, basically you gain 5 seconds of vigor on a 10-second cooldown. So that in conjunction with critical infusion would pretty much mean you would have permanent vigor uptime. Minor trait 2, sharper images. Our illusions give bleeding on crit hits. So yeah, not really that strong because we're not a Condi class, but it's free DPS, so we're not going to complain. Now column 2 is subject to your weapon choices. If you have taken your sword in the offhand or in the main hand, we do like Fencer's Finesse. We gain extra ferocity as well as increased recharge speed on sword skills, meaning we can use them more often, helping us stack more boons and so on and so forth. Really strong to have, but obviously if we're not going to take any swords, then we need to look at either Evasive Mirror, gaining projectile reflect when we dodge an attack, so that could be quite strong for certain fights and grief in some other fights. Or we can look at blinding dissipation, basically gaining blind on our shatter 2, meaning just maybe a little bit of soft CC. Minor trait 3, Master Fencer. This gives us permanent fury as well as allies 50% uptime fury when we crit strike an enemy. We pretty much should be crit capped all the time, meaning that we will permanently keep this buff up, and that's really great because that just allows the healers not to have to think about providing fury and things like that because we're pretty much doing it on their behalf. Now in column 3, our major DPS choice is Superiority Complex. This is a massive skill allowing our crit hits to deal bonus damage as well by further 10% when the foe is either disabled or below 50% health. So that is quite a big DPS increaser for us. However, if you do want to look at something maybe for open world, Deceptive Evasion is quite a strong ability. When we dodge, we basically leave a clone at the point where we dodge from. And that's really nice for just clone generation so we can get out more shatters, although not really used much in like structured gameplay. And our final specialization, Chronomancer. Minor trait 1 is our ability to all of our new shatters as well as well abilities, the most unique of them obviously being Continuum Split. For minor trait 1, we always like time catches up as our main choice. When we shatter, we give our illusion super speed, and as well illusions deal increased damage to movement impaired foes. This allows our shatter skills to do big damage, as well as obviously getting them off before the target or the boss gets some evade frames or invulnerabilities. If you do want to play slightly more supportive, you can have a look at All's Well That Ends Well. This will allow our well abilities to get a nice 5 target heal, and you can play slightly more supportive. Minor trait 2, a flow of time. We'll gain alacrity based on the amount of clones we shatter, so that's quite a nice way of getting yourself some personal alacrity. This minor trait does change if we do take a different capstone where it will produce this alacrity to our entire party, meaning we can provide alacrity through our clone shatters. However, do note that if we do choose to provide quickness, which we'll get into in a bit, you can gain alacrity and quickness through shattering, meaning it's quite strong overall. In column 2, we have a trait called improved alacrity, and this is why we need that personal alacrity so badly. Improved alacrity changes alacrity's effect on us from 25% to 50%, meaning our skills will come off cooldown a lot quicker. And that's generally where newer players struggle, is the rotation feels a lot quicker. That's because a skill, say for example, Phantasmal Disenchanter, instead of coming off every 15 seconds with perfect alacrity, it comes off every 10 seconds. So your rotation speeds up a lot with all your different weapon skills. But with that being said, alacrity decays on us 33% quicker, meaning that we have to produce more alacrity on ourselves than the other players do require, meaning that flow of time can be pretty decent to help you bridge that gap and make sure that you're getting permanent alacrity uptime. And improved alacrity also gives us an extra 10% critical damage if we do have alacrity. So it's very, very important for us to make sure we've got 100% alacrity uptime. Minor trait 3, time marches on. We move 25% quicker and movement impairing effects last 25% slower, meaning that we can move around quicker. We can do things in raids and fractals and open world quicker than other players, meaning we're better suited to do mechanics. Now in column 3, we have the choice to either produce alacrity and quickness. Now this is where I misexplained in my previous guide in the healer one, terribly sorry, but stretch time allows us to produce alacrity on phantasm skills, but it also changes flow of time to become a party-wide alacrity giver. So that means that every time we use a phantasm skill, this allows us to produce a large chunk of alacrity, but every time we use a shatter, we gain alacrity based on the amount of clones shattered. Now the similar thing for Seize the Moment. Seize the Moment basically changes it now to quickness. So we provide 5-man quickness with shatters, as well as obviously quickness when we do use our phantasm skills. Now with that being said, when you do take Seize the Moment, you will still produce personal alacrity through flow of time, meaning that you produce alacrity and quickness with your shatter skills, and then quickness with your phantasm skills. Now, I do prefer to run the quickness Seize the Moment when I'm out in open world, because this means that I will produce a large amount of quickness to everybody around me and then also gain a little bit of personal alacrity. Now let's have a look at our utility skills. It's a lot more simple for the Boon DPS Chronomancer because we have to take certain things to make this build work. The first is Signet of Ether. This is pretty much a must, not because of the heal, but because it resets our phantasm skills, meaning that we can use phantasm skills, use the heal, and they will come straight off cooldown. And this is very, very important because we need to produce enough quickness or alacrity, and we cannot do that without Boon duration if we do not have this skill. Now when it comes to your other utilities, you have to think about a few things. How good of a player are you? Do you want to produce DPS and support? Do you want to do more support? And also, are you keeping up permanent quickness or alacrity uptime? And based on those choices and the answers to those questions is the utilities you'll take. I'll go through a few of them. First of all, Well of Calamity is big DPS. You get the cripple, the weakness, and just massive DPS, especially with permanent alacrity. Getting this off cooldown every 10 seconds is quite large. So a lot of people say that this is a non-negotiable. However, this is pretty much a pure DPS ability. Now, this is a utility that is not recommended by some guides, but it makes your rotation so much easier. Phantasmal Disenchanter gives you massive damage. It's a 5-target boon rip, and also it's going to give you quickness or alacrity. Because we're running with 0 boon duration, you can do it without this, but it is so tough. Having Phantasmal Disenchanted just loosens up your rotation so much and is just much more of a fun skill to play around. Also, really big DPS skill. Then a really nice supportive utility, Well of Action, pulsing damage, and on the final pass, it'll explode, giving you might and fury for you and your party, making it quite a good skill for boon uptime, especially because we are playing a more supportive role. Now, a few skills that we should look at off the bat. A lot of people do like Mantra of Pain, because when you do start this skill, you do get 8 stacks of might, meaning you can kind of sort of precast it before certain encounters, allowing you to ramp up on might. And also, when you use these charges of this mantra skill, you do not interrupt weapon skills, meaning you can use them while doing other skills, getting some free DPS without having to stuff up your rotation. With that being said, all of the mantra skills are really good. I do like Mantra of Resolve, having that Condi cleanse. I like to take it on certain fights like Slow Thazar just as a backup, or Mantle of Concentration, having Aegis and Stability. This can be quite strong for a lot of encounters as well. Now, if you are a newer player and you do want extra clones for Generation, for Shatters, or maybe you need the Stun Break, Mirror Images is not horrible. You're getting 2 clones and it's a Stun Break, meaning that you can also get more Shatters off, things like that, so you can maintain higher boon uptime. Feedback is obviously really strong. Projectile Reflect, used in a lot of fights, whether it's fractals, raids, or your open world. Having Projectile Reflect can save your group a lot of the time. Then everything to do with Portling, whether it's Portal, Blink, Mimic, all of those things, very, very strong. I usually keep a separate build for my heal build, where I have all of that already traded. And then there are some really strong skills. Well of Precognition is a really nice supportive skill, giving yourself Aegis and Stability for your entire party, meaning you can block a lot of encounter mechanics. Then if you want to top the CC bar meter, you can add certain things like Well of Senility, giving you some extra Defiance Break Bar, as well as obviously Mantra of Distraction, having some extra CC. And then for elite utilities, it doesn't get any easier. Gravity Well, really strong with a lot of CC as well as a damage to it. Mass Invisibility, a 10 target stealth, useful in raids, open world, as well as fractals. Time Warp, being able to produce a little bit of extra quickness. Remember, trying to get this inside your continuum split, getting some free quickness, getting it off cooldown and putting it down again. And also those movement impairing effects are really strong for things like Time Catches Up. And then obviously Signet of Humility is huge CC. So if you really want to dominate CC bars like in Gorseville or in Twin Lagos, things like that, so activating this at the right time can absolutely dismantle CC bars. Now obviously I do not want to teach you how to play Mesmer right from the beginning, but let's go over a few quick weapon skills. Your dagger obviously going to be super strong with Pierce, so basically really good mob tapping, but also being able to attack from 1200 range is huge when it comes to a lot of raids fractals. You're just continuously just piking down DPS. Blade Core, really good for your clone generation skill as well. Unstable Blade, being able to place this down and just allow it to do big DPS around itself is a very strong skill overall. Now if you do take the Sword 4 is a very strong ability. When you activate it, it will channel. It will block one attack in that duration and create an evade frame. If you do activate it a second time during the channel, you'll produce the vulnerability as well as get a bit of CC. Then obviously Sword fires Phantasmal Swordman, very good skill to have, because this is basically going to generate our alacrity, our quickness, give us might, as well as being a big damaging skill. Remember, we pretty much want to reset that with our heal skill to make sure that we're casting it as often as possible. Now, if you are a player that does not have Secrets of the Obscure or have the dagger unlocked on your main hand, using a sword in the front hand, main hand is still really strong, and in certain encounters, it's actually preferred. As for your auto attack, the first 2 strikes are identical with vulnerability on both of them. Notice your final attack is absolutely gigantic. Obviously a little bit larger with a target without boons, but the final attack also rips off boons, making it very, very strong. Your skill 2, Blurred Frenzy, is a huge skill as well. Massive 8 target slice with an evade frame and some AoE. making it really strong. Then your Sword 3 skill is basically a skill that you'll cast to generate clones. So this skill will basically create a clone at the target and basically casting it a second time will switch you with the clone. Sometimes people use this in certain fights like Sabir so they can deal with the shockwave. It's a very strong skill overall, but also a very good clone generation skill. Now for our greatsword, our auto attack does more damage the further away you are from the target. Our skill 2 Mirror Blade is our clone generator and it's on a super short cooldown with perfect alacrity going to be about 2.5 seconds. So we're getting a lot of utility from the skill. Skill 3, Mind Stab, big DPS skill, as well as some cripples, so that's soft CC, and remember, that is also going to affect us when it comes to time catches up. Greatsword 4, Phantasmal Berserker, this is your Phantasm skill on your Greatsword side, very, very powerful attack. Remember, we're getting 2 Berserkers, although reduced damage, and it removes boons, so this is a big hitting skill. Pretty much your staples in your greatsword that you need to get your 4 and your 2 as often as possible. Remember, we can reset obviously with Signet of Ether. And then Greatsword 5 Illusionary Wave, this is a knockback and a CC skill. This allows you to control certain adds in fights or just do big CC. Now when it comes to our shatters, we want to use Second Split pretty much as often as possible with full clone shatters. First of all, we want as much quickness or alacrity as we can get, and as well we want some big damage. Rewinder is also a really strong skill. It's going to give us a little bit of damage, a little bit of confusion, but most importantly boons. It also recharges quicker the amount of clones that we shatter with. You should shatter this with as many clones as possible, but not jeopardize your split second shatter. F3 Time Sync is our big CC shatter. You should try do this with 3 clones, preemptively stack them so that you're ready for CC bars. We're also gaining some vulnerability, slow, and obviously some boons with it. Now your F4 Distortion gives us distortion, which means basically we're immune to damage for that 1 second. And yeah, really strong skill to have. I would pretty much preemptively use this if I've stuffed up a mechanic and I don't want to die. And now your F5 Continuum Split. This is the most unique mechanic of the Chronomancer. Basically what happens is when we activate this skill, based on the amount of clones that we had when we shattered it, we will basically take a snapshot of our health, our cooldowns, our positions, everything. Then during the duration of the Continuum Split, you can use any skills you want for DPS, support, anything, any shatters you want, other than obviously Continuum Split. And then when Continuum Split wears off, or if we push Continuum Split again, it will cancel and we will get our health back, our cooldowns, everything from when we started the Continuum Split. Now obviously that means that during Continuum Split you should try get out as many skills as possible for DPS purposes, and you should shatter absolutely every single one of your shatters that is off cooldown, because we'll gain it all back. Now let's get into the rotation concept of this guide and also how to make this a little bit easier for newer players. First thing you're going to struggle with as a newer player is obviously generating the quickness and alacrity. As a DPS support, your main priority is to make sure that either quickness or alacrity is capped based on what they've asked you to do. And if you're out in open world, I would usually just go quickness. Know that you're not going to have perfect alacrity or quickness, but you're going to have a fairly good time giving out boons and just doing metas and having a great experience. So in terms of the utilities, like I said before, if you want to go more heavy on DPS, go for Mantra of Pain and the 2 supporting wells. This will give you a lot of DPS. If you feel less confident and you're just trying out the build, I would highly recommend Phantasmal Disenchanter as one of the utilities you take, just to help you with your boon up time. Now obviously when it comes to DPSing on a support Chronomancer, you're going to want to get as many clones as possible. You're going to want to throw out Unstable Bladestorm because it will just sit there just DPSing for you, so you don't have to really think about it. You literally just got to place it out at DPS. You're going to want to get off your Phantasmal Swordsman and then probably switch over to your Greatsword. Now whether you have Phantasmal Disenchanter, I would use it, and I would use my Phantasmal Berserker. I would Continuum Split once I have my 3 clones present. You should be fairly good in terms of your shatters because of obviously using your Phantasmal Swordsman so early on, as well as your Phantasmal Berserker and Phantasmal Disenchanter. Then when you go into your Continuum Split, You can use your heal skill, use both these skills again if you have Phantasmal Disenchanter, that is, going for some big DPS, shatter every single one of your shatters, and basically just go for as much utility. Throw down your wells, whatever you want to, and when Continuum Split wears off, you will be at that previous spot, which means you can use your heal skill again, get out both these skills, and that will give you that buffer of quickness and alacrity that you need. That means that you don't have to worry too much about your rotation to make sure that you're absolutely glassing it, and that will give you time to do DPS things. Now, if you really do not care about DPS at all, and you just want to make sure that you have boon up time, you can consider getting rid of Well of Action if Might is covered. If you do not need to produce Might, you can have a look at things like mirrored images for extra clones. Remember, the more clones we get, the quicker we can shatter, therefore producing a lot of alacrity or quickness. And if you are struggling even more, you can have a look at Time Warp if you are the quickness giver, or if you're the alacrity giver but the quickness giver is struggling to maintain high quickness uptime. Using that inside of Continuum Split will basically allow you to get quite a decent amount for your beginning ramp up. Now, obviously, if you are struggling further, consider some drastic options. Go into your build and your equipment, maybe switch out some of your armor pieces for Diviner's pieces. Now, obviously, this is going to drop your crit chance, which means you aren't going to be critting, which means you're not going to be doing big DPS. But if you push up your boon duration, perhaps switch out your impacts for concentration sigils, things like that, it's going to give you a little bit of leeway. And then as you get better, switch back to less and less boon duration until you feel comfortable. Or if you want to, have two sets of armor. One where you run with high boon duration, so if there are fights with split phases or ads die quickly, maybe Gauze Fill and your team's pumping down the spurts too quickly and you're unable to keep up perfect boon uptime, sometimes you might say to yourself, I want to run high boon duration because I'm not keeping up my quickness or alacrity in the split phases. You know, maybe you're in Shattered Observatory and you're doing the first boss and you phase and then you're trying to fight the ads, but they're dying before you can generate clones and shatter and use your skills. Sometimes high boon duration in certain fights is not a bad thing. And in some fights like your Karen, your Wing 4 boss 1, you've just got literally straight DPS from the beginning to end with barely any mechanics involved. That means that you can run lower boon duration because there's nothing stopping you from generating clones and shattering. And then obviously don't forget to switch off Offense's Finesse if you are not running the sword, and obviously don't forget to switch based on what utility is required for the fight. And that's it, that's the video. I really hope you enjoyed the guide. I really think that support Boon Chrono, whether it's the DPS or the heal variant, is so much fun to play at the moment. I hope the guide helps you. I hope that you can take your Guild Wars to the next level and that you've enjoyed the guide. If you have, please like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Really helps the channel grow, everything. And if you didn't enjoy the video, thank you anyway for watching. It really means a lot anyway. Have a good one, guys. Cheers.